Select Controllers from the Access Control menu on the You will be presented with a list of all controllers that have been discovered on the network. The information available will include the type, or model of the controller, the IP address that has been assigned either statically or via DHCP, depending on your initial setup of the device, the connection state, which shows if the device is connected to the gateway, and finally the administrative state, which shows if the device has been configured on the gateway, and if so, whether it is currently in service, or out of service. For newly discovered devices that have not been configured, the connection state would be listed as not connected. The administrative state would show as pre-provisioned. Let's begin by configuring the Mercury 1501. Select the controller from the list of discovered devices. The configuration details for the selected controller will be available at the bottom of your screen. Most of the details will be filled in for you automatically. Note, some of the following parameters are unique to specific makes and models of controllers, and may not appear for all devices. It is good practice to give the controller a descriptive name that makes it easy to identify the type and location of that device. For example, First Floor MDF Mercury 1501. The name given to the controller must be unique throughout the system. The gateway name should match the gateway that you are currently configuring. The access controller type is a read-only field and will be auto-populated to show the type of controller you are configuring. For example, HID Edge, ASA Obloy VS1, or in this case, a Mercury 1501. The description field is an optional field that can be used to enter useful information that would be helpful to users of the system. For example, the physical location of the device. Use the baud rate drop-down box to select the data transfer rate, in bits per second, between the controller and the reader interface or I/O module. The default value is 38,400. All peripheral reader interfaces like the MR51E or input-output boards must be configured to use the same baud rate to operate correctly. The Attach to Gateway option is only available for Mercury controllers. This option must be checked in order to connect the Mercury controller to the gateway. Note, a controller can only be connected to one gateway. For this example, we are going to attach the 1501 to this gateway. You will see a notice indicating that the gateway is going to scan the attached devices to determine if there are any peripheral devices attached to the 1501. This scan can take up to 5 minutes to complete. Click Save to begin the scan. A progress bar will indicate the status of the scan. Once the scan is completed, the administrative state field will be available. Select from the drop-down list to change the admin state from pre-provision to in service. The IP address of the controller will be automatically populated for discovered devices and should not be changed in the gateway configuration. Any changes to the IP address should be made directly on the controller. The MAC address field is read-only and will be populated automatically for certain types of controllers. For example, the HID Edge and Edge Plus. The following fields that determine the behavior of doors that will be attached to a specific controller are populated with default values but can be changed to meet the requirements of your environment. The door held open timer determines the amount of time, in seconds, that a door can be held open until an alarm activates. Individual doors can be configured to override this default value set on the controller. The extended door held open timeout is used to extend the door held timer for card holders that have the ADA or American Disabilities Act box checked for their badge. ADA is typically enabled for card holders with disabilities or those requiring additional time when entering an access-controlled door. For example, the user of a loading dock or mailroom entrance. The strike time default value is used to determine the time, in seconds, that a locked door stays unlocked after receiving an unlock signal. Individual doors can also be configured to override this default. The extended strike time, similar to the extended door held open timer, is used to provide additional time for card holders with ADA enabled or that require additional time for entering a particular door. The system contact is an optional value that allows you to input the name of the installer or system manager responsible for the system. The last values to be completed on the General Configuration tab are the installer and install date. For auto-discovered devices, the installer will be listed as such. You can update this information to reflect the installer or their company, primarily for record-keeping purposes. The install date is used for warranty purposes, and for some controllers will be auto-populated with the date the controller was discovered. Once all of the information has been entered, click Save to complete the controller configuration and put it in service. The connection state for the chosen controller will change once the gateway has connected to the controller, and the admin state will indicate that the controller is now in service. Complete the same steps for all controllers in the system. For supported controllers that are not auto-discovered, you can add them manually by clicking Add. You will see the controller details just as you did with the auto-discovered controllers. However, you will need to complete several fields that you did not have to edit previously. At a minimum, you need to enter a unique name for the controller, select the controller type, and enter an IP address. Once you have clicked Save, the gateway will establish initial communication with the controller and the administrative state will become available for you to put the controller in service, similar to the previous example. The Diagnostics tab can be used to determine the following information about a given controller: the hardware version, the serial number, the firmware version, and the firmware release date. Note, not all information is available for all controllers. This is an example of how different controllers may have different fields for configuration. Unlike the Mercury panel we just configured, the HID Edge and Edge Plus readers have fields for username and password. These fields are required and must match the credentials configured on the controller. The gateway will auto-discover HID controllers that have been configured on the same network segment that the gateway resides on. To connect the gateway to an HID controller, simply change the administrative state from pre-provision to in service. Note, the HID controller must be configured via the web interface of the controller itself. The IP address of the controller as well as the IP address of the host that the controller will be connected to. Please refer to the HID-VRTX user guide for more information regarding the controller configuration. Now that all controllers we want attached to this gateway are connected and in service, we can move on to the configuration of the reader interfaces. Please return to the Configuration, Access Control playlist to continue with the next tutorial covering reader interfaces.